Anjali K. Naya. Is Miss Anjali there? And Miss Janavi Nath. So, but at least the first two are here. So, I think we can begin. I'd like to welcome all of you to the third technical session. So, I'd like to call upon Dr. Shubhra Roy, who's an assistant professor from Netaji Subhash Mahavidyalaya, Udaipur, to present her paper on ecofeminism and subversion of gender roles in Cockbrook folktales, a critical study of Jamie Shalom, the Braveheart. I hope my pronunciation is correct. Yeah,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Roy, you're most welcome.
Okay.
Please, yeah,
Hello,
present your.
hello everyone. I am Shubhra Roy, and I have been teaching at Netaji Subhash Mahavidyalaya, Udaipur, Tripura since February 2022. And the title of the paper that I am going to present is Ecofeminism and the Subversion of Gender Roles in Kokborok Folktales, a critical study of Jami Cholong, the Braveheart. The term ecofeminism was coined by the French writer de Uban in the year 1974. According to ecofeminism, the operations of women and nature are interconnected. That is, devaluation of nature and women go hand in hand. This view is based on the two basic perspectives of essentialist and constructionist ecofeminism. The essentialist ecofeminism foregrounds the qualities like empathy, kindness, and affection that mark the point of commonality between women and nature. But according to the constructionist ecofeminism, this point of commonality is a social construct. There is no essential similarity between women and nature, and any positive affirmation of it would further underscore the transcendental dualism which leads to the formation of hierarchies. Binary definition, which is used to distinguish between things dissimilar to each other, can be a potent tool to highlight the oppositional features in an essentialist manner. In the context of gender, binaries are used to distinguish between male and female, and the oppositional definition simply leads to the subjugation of women through cultural norms of domesticity. Ecofeminism finds the same oppositional dualism in human nature relationship. Human development is seen as opposite to the preservation of nature. In the story, Jamicholong the Braveheart, a folklore from Tripura, the readers are introduced to the hilly terrains and forest land of Tripura where I'm quoting from the text, humans were destroying forests and stripping the earth of its resources to accommodate the increasing population. I am again quoting from the text. Trees were cut and land cleared, allowing the exposed earth to wither and die, along with the destruction of the habitat of innumerable species with no food or shelter. The story has been translated into English by Biprojit Bhattacharjee in the book Kereng Kothoma, a modern retelling of the folk tales of Tripura. Kereng Kothoma is a Kokborok word which means folk tales, orally transmitted from one generation to another by storyteller. True to its spirit, the story begins with a little girl, Jimiri, asking her mother to narrate a new story that would break the normative patterns of the regular ones. What follows next is a beautiful rendition of the valiant story of Maya, the protector or the guardian spirit of the forests. In ecofeminism, women are heralded as saviors of nature, invested with the mission to protect, preserve, and nurture the environment. In the book La Feminisme ou la Mort, Daubon calls out to women to save the planet. Though the story begins with the introduction of Jami Cholong, the bravest and the strongest man in the locality, it is Maya, the savior of the forest and its animals, who turns out to be the real hero at the end of the story. In Silent Spring, Carson focuses on the sinister aspect of man's technological progress, its adverse effect on environment, and the widespread destruction of wildlife. In Jamicholong the Braveheart, Maya intuitively knows that it is pure madness, and so she meditated every night to attain spiritual affirmation to end this madness, thinking about all the animals and wildlife that the humans had destroyed. Maya is a victim of environmental destruction herself. Her father was killed by poachers who intruded into the forest in search of rare Kasturi deer. Maya took up the responsibility of saving the forest and its inhabitants after that. Quoting from the text, whenever somebody entered the jungle for hunting innocent animals or cutting trees for wood, she lured them craftily to her house, took good care of them, and when the time was right, incapacitated them and sent them to the forbidden part of the forest, which was like a maze with numberless dangers from which there was no escape. This was the way she resisted against environmental exploitation. The translated version of this folklore by Biprojit Bhattacharjee has provided a neutral gaze that refrains from objectifying any particular gender. It has also presented an alternative role model that encourages a more egalitarian gender perspective. That is why Jami Cholong, the strongest man in the area, gets defeated in the duel and acknowledges fearlessly, quotation from the text, "You know, I came here in search of a man stronger than me. Instead, I found a woman who is not only stronger but also possesses the highest virtue, the act of showing mercy." Jami Cholong, for whom muscle power and physical strength were the ultimate yardstick to measure superiority, realized the importance of empathy and caring, the so called feminist traits. They get married and vow to protect the forest from further attacks. But the readers are left amazed at the end of the story, where it is revealed that Jimiri is actually the daughter of Maya and Jami Cholong, and she is growing up in an atmosphere where there is no definite gender roles. When the story ends, Maya, the mother, goes to the other room to help the father, who was there cleaning and cutting vegetables for next day's feast. So I'll stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Shubhra. Very beautifully presented, portrayed the concept of ecofeminism through the story. Any questions from the audience? I would encourage all the research scholars to ask questions if there are any. No questions? So thank you, Dr. Roy. I really enjoyed listening to you. I wish I could have heard you more because I haven't read any Cockbrook folk tales before. And when I saw your topic, it really made me actually search for some tales. And I really want to spend some time reading these tales. Are there other tales available on similar lines?
Yes,
Talking about
yes, ma'am.
ecofeminism?
Yes, yes. Many such stories are available, and I can actually send you the PDF that of a particular book. This particular one, that is Keren Kothoma. I have this
Okay.
one with me. I can send it to you.
Okay.
Uh,
Is it
through
available
WhatsApp.
online? Because
Yes,
I
yes, yes.
spotted
It's
one.
available. It's
Yeah,
available
yeah.
online.
A
You can go to
modern, a
Google and search.
modern. Yeah, I did. I think I've got it. Biprojit
Okay.
Bhattacharjee, right? A
Yes, yes,
modern
yes.
retelling. Yeah, it actually, I'm quite interested in ecofeminism myself. So beautifully portrayed, and I'm sure the listeners have gained a lot through your depiction, through your paper.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
May
Thank you so
may
much.
I, Praveen,
Yeah, please, please.
I just would like to ask, ma'am, although it was a really very good presentation and very properly, structured and
Yeah.
presented also. I'll be very happy if you could look into another aspect, that's Indian aspect of looking at nature. So if you could add a sort of comparison or comparison how we look at nature and how it was destroyed, in 1800 onwards. So that also will, it will enhance the quality of your this beautiful research. Only a humble submission. That's all.
Thank you so much, sir, for this suggestion. Actually, sir, I try to keep it very simple and short for the sake of presentation. And definitely, I have taken up the views of Vandana Shiva, who is an
Yeah.
Indian ecofeminist. But I would definitely add some more points when I would develop this one into a full-fledged paper for publication. And
Yes,
thank you
yes.
so
I'm
much for
sure
your
that it's going to
suggestion.
come out really well if we draw a comparison as well. Yeah,
Yes, ma'am.
thank you,
Thank you.
Dr. Gopal and Dr. Roy. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Um, May I now call upon Hadia Chishti, who's a research scholar the Department of English, Baba Ghulam Shah Badshah University, Rajouri, Jammu and Kashmir, India.
Yes, ma'am. I need to share my screen. I have actually a
Please.
PP.
Please go ahead. And Hadia, I think we've met before, right? On another in another conference.
I think so, I
Yeah.
guess.
Okay, it'll be a pleasure listening to you again.
Is it visible?
Not yet. At least I am not able to see it. Yeah, I can see it now.
Okay.
If you could press F5 so that we could see the slideshow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so my topic is war, racism, and displacement in Ilyas Alavi's brother Khusro. Ilyas is he's an Afghani poet. He's from Middle East. He's a visual artist also. So he's one of the very important voices when it comes to Middle Eastern literature, particularly dwelling on topics of displacement, refugee crisis, war, violence, bloodshed. So this poem, Brother Khosrow, it reads like a narrative poem. It's actually an address to a Kurdish brother from a Hazara brother. Actually, these are two communities, Hazaras in Afghanistan and Kurdish community in Iraq. These are two ethnic communities. These are marginalized also. So what Ilyas is actually trying to do in this poem, it's a very long poem. Here he's talking about, the Middle Eastern conflicts in different Middle Eastern countries. He's trying to join the dots. He's trying to kind of makes understand, there's a common underlying pattern when it comes to orchestrating or engineering of violence or war in a country or a state. So we have different countries, we have different conflicts that he has mentioned very briefly, but yes, the motive here is to understand, what actually war does to a society and community. Even if the states and nations are divided by geographical lines, even if they are divided by linguistically, yet the wound, the trauma, the violence that they're subjected to, it kind of unites them, yokes them together. So experiences more or less are similar. So that is the brief overview. And this poem, Brother Khosrow, is actually written in Persian, and later on it was translated into English. So this is an overview. The objective is definitely, to understand the experiences of the victims. I would call them the wretched of the earth, how they're subjected to violence, and what actually war does to society or a community who are divided by geographical borders, and especially dwell on the themes of displacement and racism as the byproducts of war, or we can say the political chaos, which impacts the people in general or particular. So a brief analysis of the poem. Here actually, when you read this poem, we kind of, we find that this is divided into different sections. He takes you back in time and space. He takes you to different places. For example, this poem starts with, very visceral and harrowing image of a bare body of a Ugandan child who is a slave, and he's tortured by colonizers. Then he takes you to Australia, where he talks about this black Aboriginal girl who is sexually exploited by the colonial masters. And he talks about how this girl is separated from a family and how she's subjected to the sexual violence. We also have the reference to the Palestinian conflict. We also have, he also talks about Kandahar, he talks about Rwanda, he talks about Baghdad, and how these men and women, young children, everybody, how it kind of, how the war and violence, the bloodshed, the political skirmishes, how it kind of impacted people. I have quoted some lines. This poem is really beautiful. I would like you all to at least go through it. I could not quote it, but I still have tried to quote some sentences which I find relevant. Like he says, the earth will discharge everything it once concealed. All secrets will begin to float. At other place, he talks about, home. He questions home, which is very important when we talk about displacement and refugee. What this four-letter word home means to a person who is uprooted from his place, who is forced to flee for his life, what it means. And he says, home, a ridiculous consolation. Home is nowhere. Obviously, these people, they either are killed, they are, made to flee to other countries, to seek refuge, to seek asylum. So home is nothing for them. All the notions of belongingness, all the notions that they kind of a person harbors when it comes to, being in a place, living in a place, all those notions eventually get shattered. So he questions all these things. He talks about, what these people who are subjected to violence, what they feel about different things, what actually happens to them. And like he says, the distance between the border smells like blood. In a way, this border, on one hand, we say this is a geographical boundary line which separates two nations or countries, but symbolically, this border is a scar, it is a wound, is a semi-permeable membrane, which kind of, whereby we see that how these people kind of, physically they are moving from one place to another, and psychologically what actually this is a never ending journey, right? And there is bloodshed, there is violence, there's chaos, and there's no order and stability. Even after they move from one place to another place, there is no guarantee that they will have a stable future. There will be that they would kind of, find peace and calm. Obviously there are other risks that are involved. So there's also a reference to ISIS and NATO soldiers. So he does not only talk about what humans do to other humans, what violence is unleashed by one human being on another. He also talks about the devastation and degradation that these wars cause to environment. Like he at times you find him, he self-identifies himself with the inanimate objects also. For example, we have this quick river which is in Syria, and he says, I am the quick river. Till yesterday the young fish shared their naked body with me, but today I'm bitter and bring up silent travelers from the other side of Aleppo. Like he says that this water is now contaminated and it's poisonous. Obviously the human bodies, the dead bodies, they have been kind of thrown into this river, so again contaminating, destroying the environment. So not only does a war or a political conflict impact the human civilization, but also it impacts everything around you, around us. He even talks about the linguistic paralysis when it comes to voicing the inhuman deeds or actions that we do. Like he says, Brother Khosrow, they killed many trees, they killed many mountains, many horses, they killed many cows, but no one writes a poem for them. They say the human comes first, always the human. Again, talking about it's not just humans who suffer, things around us, they also get impacted one way or the other. So as far as the theoretical framework is concerned, so since this was a presentation, so I have tried to limit it to only 3 theorists here. For example, Sinisa Maliswick, in her work, The Sociology of War and Violence, she talks about violence. She talks about, how this violence is one of the central constituents of human subjectivity. And particularly when we talk about the modern man, it's there. Similarly, in similar terms, we have the psychoanalysts like E.F.M. Durban and John Bowlby. They have written this particular work, Personal Aggressiveness in War, where again they talk about the aggressiveness and how humans, like we say, what man has made of man, how humans, they channelize this aggression, and what eventually leads to where a person transfers his or her grievances into bias and hatred against other races, religions, nations, and ideologies. Like if we talk about to contextualize it, like I said in the beginning, he takes us to Uganda, he talks about Ugandan boy, he's a slave, then he takes us to Australia. So again, we have the issue, the theme of racism. All these things, these are actually in a way we can say this is something which is present within us, and we humans try to channelize it on others in different ways. Similarly, A.R. Zolberg, in his work, The Formation of New States as a Refugee Generating Process, he says the most obvious thing about refugee flows is that they're unruly, in the sense that they result from events, just civil strife, abrupt changes of regime, arbitrary government decisions, or international war, all of which are generally considered singular and unpredictable occurrences. I would like to conclude it by saying that, human beings, you find them in different roles. You find them as a victim as well as a perpetrator. So war is something which has always been there, and it will always be there, because given to the contemporary global scenario, how countries are kind of, fighting for resources. So eventually we know like what war actually does to a society or to a community. It results in significant deterioration of infrastructure and ecosystem. We have decrease in social spending, we have famine, we have large-scale immigration from war zones, and often we find that these people, these prisoners of war or the victims, how they're often mistreated. So even if we talk about racism and if we talk about displacement, these are the things that have been there, and they again talk about the fragility and the vulnerability of human lives. So all these things have impacted us severely. We still find these cases and incidents happening. That's it from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, Hadia. I would like to invite questions from the audience now. Questions, observations? So Hadia, since there are no questions, I would like to congratulate you on such a wonderfully prepared paper. You've brought out the displacement caused because of war, how it affects the human beings, how it affects lives around us, and the agony, which obviously has been beautifully portrayed in the poem. You've talked about how it destroys communities, and whether it's community A or B, the after effects are the same. Human beings suffer in a similar fashion across the globe whenever there's a war. So this long-term physical and psychological harm, which is made to children, to families, is obviously, it cannot be mended. So I appreciate the manner in which you've presented your paper, and of course the theoretical framework that you've shared with us. Yes, when you present a paper for a conference, there are limitations. I'm sure when you develop it in a paper, a proper paper, you'll be able to bring it out in a better manner. So congratulations once again, Hadia. Really enjoyed listening to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Most welcome. So may I now call upon Anjali K. Nair, research scholar from Kannur University. Anjali, are you there?
Yes, madam. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so Anjali Nair is now going to present her paper on Silhouettes of the Cityscape, a reading of Orhan Pamuk's Istanbul, Memories and the City.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for your welcome note. Good afternoon to all. So I'm going for an oral presentation. Sorry, I'm not taking a PowerPoint presentation. And my topic is on the Pamuk's Memoir of a Broken Past, which is about Istanbul, the Memories and a City, which is a very famous novel from Turkey. So I shall go through my presentation. Contemporary Istanbul is a dynamic city with a long history of two empires and a republic, and it extends from European and Asian sides of the Bosphorus. As everybody knows, the European cultural capital boasts of a culture that bridges two sides, that is the East and the West. And with a booming population of more than 15 million, a changing skyline, and a wide array of international companies, five-star hotels, as well as art events, Istanbul disorients its visitors and inhabitants alike with its contrasts and constant changes. Turkey's largest city is also one of the largest in the world, representing the country's global aspirations as well as its heritage. For its vigor of being a completely compelling and mysterious city, the representation of Istanbul would have been so real in the hands of a non-native writer, but the land was blessed to have a son like Orhan Pamuk, who knew the warmth of its wholesome touch in Istanbul, the Memories and a City. So coming to the paper, which are the topics I've included, the novel starts as a tender accounts of the author's childhood, his family life, the insightful musings of the characters of Istanbul and its denizens, as Istanbulus we say. And there are 22 years of Pamuk's life, which uses the various portrayal of 22 years in his life through various ranges of autobiographical details, childhood memories, photographs from family albums and newspapers. It also includes articles, paintings, especially if you have been through the book, most of you might be knowing, there are wonderful photographs, though given in black and white. It's a really appealing novel to all of us. Though not a novel, it's a memoir actually. And the multiplicity of the sources that Pamuk incorporates into his narrative echoes his experience at the city, also offering a non-linear journey with various diverging points along the streets of Istanbul. Whoever reads the memoir feels like we are walking through Istanbul with Pamuk. We don't feel like we are from India, we are from the other nation, but we have a feeling that we also belong to Istanbul, and it's beautifully recorded as different spaces. We have mental spaces, physical spaces, and which is categorized by the writer. It's really wonderful. And the city emerges as an entity that molds the self of the inhabitants as well as the self in turn. The city shapes his writing. So, most of the novels of Pamuk, we know it is influenced by the city itself. There are touches from Istanbul in all of his novels, other than Istanbul also. And he begins with a visible space of writing. The first space it is accorded is a visible space of writing, the language that moves to the Turkey's literary cityscape as the east and west axis and concludes in the identification of the city and the self. So finally, there is a communion between the city and the self. The writer accords himself with the city. He believes that the development of the city is through his self. His childhood, his adulthood, the process of his development as a human being is highly influenced by the city. And he invents himself in Istanbul as memories, as a narrator. Orhan himself is a narrator, and he's recounting his experience in terms of autobiographical anecdotes, journalistic comments, personal impressions, as well as dreams. We are lucky that we are coming to know the dreams of the writer as well. So that is a different approach which I found in this books particularly. And despite the surplus images of the city is given in different, we can say, a kind of a trail of pictures are given in writing and as well as pictures. So through the writings, we are getting different photographs. We can connect the photograph with the writing and we feel that we are in the city. And the course of the narrative is indicating that the sense of loss, not one, but different Orhans exist. And every viewpoint of the writer makes us believe that it is not a single person, but different persons are giving the narrative of the city in a different points of views. And Pamuk is parallel with Orhan, with Istanbul, both being defined by the presence of various conflicting forces. He portrays the various duplicities that dominate the city and the life, respectively. Istanbul, and Orhan. The multiplicity of Orhan is made explicit in the first chapter of the narrative entitled Another Orhan, and the first sentence in the book itself shows the presence of a stranger who does not belong to the city, and that stranger is the other Orhan. So I quote from the book. From a very young age, I suspected there was more than to my world that I could see. Somewhere in the streets of Istanbul, in a house resembling ours, there lived another Orhan, so much like me that he could pass for my twin, even my doubling. So here we can find a double space of representation, which finally, towards the end of the book, combines together to be one, and he identifies Orhan and Pamuk are the same person. The presence of another Orhan evoked in the narrative draws with a different voice, which will appear throughout the narration, and hopefully, Istanbul with its multiple imageries will definitely have enigmas and wonders for each one of us. The 37 chapters that compose the narrative are placed haphazardly. We can't say that there is a particular order for this novel because it moves here and there in time or through time or with time, we can say. And the lack of linear development and the shift of tone in different chapters and the coexistence of image and text are the strategies Pamuk uses in order to underline his experience at the city as fragmented and fluid. So it is not a linear narration. We don't have like this year this will follow, second year this comes, third year this comes. We don't have that. But we have a fragmented narration, which is more appealing than a linear narration for such a country. And Istanbul illustrates the geographical, literary, autobiographical, non-linear elements of Istanbul in all its vigor. Walking through the avenues of Istanbul, Orhan discovers the poor, neglected back streets of the old city, where ruins places the memories of the glorious days of Ottoman Empire, and he learns how to both read and rewrite Istanbul through text and images that it offers. While Pamuk and Istanbulu invite the reader to experience the city, he gets lost in the lanes without any directions, and I assure we writers are also getting lost in between along with Pamuk. For those who have read, might be able to connect with my words. The void of characterization of Orhan, the city of Istanbul, by extension Turkish identity, no longer appears in an unfathomable emptiness. It transcends to a space of multiple possibilities, a locus, both individual and cultural identity is referred. And living in the same city for a long time causes one's perception of it to be influenced by one's memories or perspectives. And there is a magical relation between space and body here, which is quite complicated and at times contentious. Towards the closing chapters of Istanbul, to be exact, the chapter number 34, named To Be Unhappy is to Hate Oneself and One City. Right from the opening sentence, the reader draws out a strangeness in the worlds of Orhan, who is no long more than 200 pages, has been trying to do the same. And it goes like this, he quotes, "Sometimes one city looks like an alien place. I am left wondering if the city is punishing me for adding to the squalor for being here at all. When its melancholy begins to seep into me and from me into it, I begin to think that there is nothing I can do. Like the city, I belong to the living dead. I am a corpse that still breathes, a wretch condemned to walk the streets and pavements that only can remind me of my filth and my defeat." Here, the defeat is nothing but the inability to realize the exactness of Istanbul. So, here Pamuk is trying to be very humble. He's showing his humility. Despite writing so much about the different spaces in Istanbul, he tells, I am unable to understand, and I'm unable to realize my city in its exactness. I'm concluding towards the end. In the struggle of reconciling the various distinct aspects of the city, as well as the different desires he has regarding his life, Orhan comes to realize that the feeling of confusion, the blurry view of his life and his city, the huzun and the inner exile are the things that define his relationship with the city. In a nutshell, the narrative illustrates the futility attempting to read the city as an individual unit. It demonstrates how the city eludes definition beyond the labyrinths and allowing the pedestrians to get lost. Only by getting lost, Orhan can become an observer who would be rewriting the city as he wishes. For he did not want to be an artist, instead, he was going to be a writer. And we are lucky that we have a writer from Turkey so beautifully portraying his novel, giving us a chance to have a spatial reading of a city which we are unknown to. Thanking you all once again. I hope you enjoyed the presentation.
We certainly did, Anjali. Beautiful presentation. I would like to invite questions from the audience. Any questions? All right, Anjali, since there are no questions, I would like to congratulate you once again.
Thank you, ma'am.
Beautifully presented. I mean, actually, we walked along the streets of Istanbul along with you and, of course, the author. So you in a brief span of time, talked about everything that emerges out of the story. I've happened to read the story about the memoir before, and of course, it couldn't have been depicted in a better manner. Really appreciate how you bring to light the non-linear journey and the influences that the city has had on the author, and how through pictures and through the writings that he has shared with the readers, he's talked about all the dominating aspects. So really appreciate how you brought them to the fore, and I'm sure that the paper that you're going to develop on this is also going to come out wonderfully well. Congratulations once again.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. May I now call upon the last speaker of this session, Ms. Janavi Nath?
Yes, ma'am, definitely.
Yeah,
I'm trying to.
You would like to share your screen?
Yes, I'm trying to share it.
Okay, so Ms. Janavi Nath is a research scholar working with the, enrolled with the Department of English, Rajiv Gandhi University, and she's going to share with us her presentation on problematizing intercultural transposition in literary translation.
Okay.
So, Janavi, are you going to press F5 so that we can see the entire screen?
Okay, ma'am. Can you see the
slide
now?
Slideshow. I can see the slide. You could run slideshow or press F5.
Yeah, I did so, ma'am, but I don't know why it's not appearing a full screen.
Okay.
Is it okay, ma'am, if I go like this?
Yeah, please carry.
Okay. Respected Chairperson, Shruti Mita Mehta, ma'am, and my dear co-paper presenters and other participants. So the title of my paper is problematizing intercultural transposition in literary translation. At the outset, I would like to discuss what is translation studies. The very word translation has been derived from the Latin word translatio, which means to carry across or to transport. And we all know that translation is the transfer of meaning from one language to another. And it is also a code system. A translator decodes a source text and recodes it as a target text. And being a contrastive strategy, translation deals with two languages. And for example, you can talk about the grammar translation method for bilingual acquisition. Then Jeremy Monday put forward three implications of the term. First of all, it refers to the product, which is the translated text. Then the process, that is the act of translating. And the very word, the very phrase translation studies is actually a coinage by James S. Holmes, and he presented his paper named Nature of Translation Studies in 1972. So here we get the phrase translation studies. And there had been many demands for translation as a separate domain. And for example, we can talk about the Second Congress of Slavists in Moscow in 1958. And now translation has been, although not a very old discipline, but its entry can be marked with its inclusion in Modern Language Association in 1983.
I would like to interrupt you here. Are you running the slides? Because we can only see the title slide right now.
Okay, sorry, ma'am. Let me go back and try it one more time.
Yeah, now they were moving.
Okay.
So can you
see the
now we can see the next slide. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am. Yeah. So the very first definition by Octavio Paz, as it says, all knowledge is translation, is a very universal way of defining translation, because we know that knowledge is passed on and it is never original. Whatever we now know is actually passed on from our previous generation. So that is the way why translation is related to word, and that word can be always reworded. And phrase, for example, sentence can be always made into new sentences. And in the second example, there is a linguistic interpretation of translation. Susan Basnas says that translation involves the transfer of meaning contained in one set of language signs into another set of language signs through competent use of dictionary and grammar. But at the same time, she is not denying the fact that culture and other related factors are also equally influential in the translation of any text. And then thirdly, translation as a academic domain, we can see that this particular domain is related to the discussion of theory and phenomena of translation, and its nature is multilingual, and it is interdisciplinary, and it encompasses languages, linguistics, communication studies, and so on. So considering the time limit, I will be going a little fast. So here we have three categories of translation theories. In the source-oriented approaches, there were theorists who were putting more emphasis on the transmission of both the message and the style of the original text, so that it can be faithfully presented in the target text. And then we have the linguistic approach, which started in 1900, and they believe that translation is actually a linguistic activity, and since it is related to code system, therefore a translator should be very careful, because both the sender and the receiver, which means the source text author and the target text translator, both belong to different cultural background, and therefore the translator has to take great care while translating a text. And then thirdly, we have the target oriented or culture oriented, or rather function oriented approach, which is related to how culture is more important than a linguistic orientation of a translation. And they believe that how a target reader receives translation is a defining factor in which way translation will be going. And then they were also saying that one translation should be actually guided by the function it is going to cause in the target translation. Coming to translation of literature, there is a very beautiful poem by Vladimir Nabokov. So he says that what is translation? On a platter, a poet's pale and glaring head, a parrot's screech, a monkey's chatter, and a profanation of the dead, reflected words can only shiver like elongated lights that twist in the black mirror of a river. So this is how we can understand that translation is a very complex text. Complex act, and since we have to not only take care of the content or message, but at the same time we have to see how the form or style is presented in the source text, and that's why we have to also take care of the aesthetics, and all the three things should be there in the target text. And we know that literary text is also a cultural text because language is embedded in culture. Then one has to also take care of the pragmatic properties like context, implicature, speech act, coherence, and cohesion. Because if a translator doesn't attend to the implied meaning, then the whole signification will be lost in the target text. And in literature, meaning is layered, rather multi-layered, and the language is metaphoric, ambiguous, and implied. And all this makes literature, translation of literature, transcreation, and it is altogether a new writing because originality of the translator is always engaged in a literary piece. Then Roman Jacobson said that there is no full equivalence between code units. If we discuss the following examples, then you can come to understand that. My brain has two parts, the left and the right. In the right part, there is nothing right, and as for the left part, there is nothing left. This is quite a hilarious example, though. And then the next example, children enjoy their childhood and adults their adulthood. So all both the examples pertain to linguistic equivalence, and these these sentences are untranslatable because there is no formal relationship between these two nouns in English. And then I would also like to talk about another example. Guayca, there is a language in southern Venezuela, and that culture has a trichotomous distinction among good, bad, and violating taboo. So if one has to translate some concepts related to this trichotomous distinction, then one will not be able to translate it into a language if that target language has dichotomous distinction between good and bad. So that's why culture comes into play with translation. Coming to translation of poetry, Robert Frost said that what is left out in translation is poetry. It not only says that translation as a whole or in general is complex, but translation of poetry in particular is a very complex work. And why it is so is because poetry is an intricate work of style and aesthetics, and it is always a needed performance. And we know that a higher level of language is used in poetry. It is very rich in figurative language, and therefore if a translator only works through a paraphrasing, then it will not be enough, and it will not make the target text will not turn into a creative writing. Then we should also consider that language of poetry is metaphoric, and every poet has their own unique experimental style. And see, let us consider this line by Shakespeare. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? So Albert Lewis commented that I can hear some noise. Okay, so he believed that if someone has to translate this particular line into a language where summer is not a very pleasant season, then the whole line will be actually untranslatable. So this is where culture comes into. And then we have also take care about the rhythmic, lyrical, and incantatory effect in a target text. For example, if we talk about incantatory effect, then for example, refrain has a semantic emphasis. So like if we see superficially, then it will appear that refrain is just repeated lines. It does not contain any meaning, but then it has some stylistic meaning. And then let us consider the two lines that I have quoted from a Hindi poem. Aap se ban gayi tum se ban gayi tu. So if we have to translate these lines into English, then it will not be a very a fruitful production, because in English we do not have such a distinction among aap, tomb and to, and there will be that, that idea will be non-existence in English. Coming to translation of novel. In a novel, there are polyphonic voices, and there are multiple points of views, different, there are simultaneous perspectives from all the participants in a novel. It may be the narrator or it may be the characters. And then there are heteroglotic character. For example, there may be dialectal variations, then sociolectal and idiosyncratic variation. So every individual may be speaking in different ways. So all these things should be carefully taken into consideration. Then we have the temporal and geographical situation of both source text and target text. So these two factors are equally important. And as a whole, our novel is free, open-ended, ambivalent, and ununiform narrative. And therefore, the translator most of the time fails to make all these distinctions apparent in the target text. Coming to culture and translation, we know that culture is a composite whole that encompasses belief system, worldview, customs, and so on. And we also know that culture is embedded in a particular language. Within the culture, certain words of that particular language has meaning, and outside that particular culture, all the words, I mean not all the words, but specific words lose their meaning. So therefore, one has not only to go for word-for-word translation, but at the same time wants to see how a cultural equivalence should be established in the target text. And then since literature is a product of history and culture, the translator should not only remain in the linguistic level of transmitting the message, but at the same time culture, history, and ideology, and all those sorts of things should be equally considered. And let us consider this particular example. There is a beautiful poem by H.W. Longfellow named A Psalm of Life. It has been long back translated into English by Ananda Chandra Agarwala. There, the whole idea of Psalm of Life is like that. The Longfellow is trying to request all the readers that don't consider life as an empty dream. Life has meaning, and one should celebrate life with both body and the soul. But in the Assamese translation, the whole signification has been distorted, and the translator poet presented the poem in such a way that body is something that should be actually not ignored, and soul is something that can give us salvation, and therefore bodily pleasure should not be entertained. So this is superficially seen, it is quite a opposite meaning. But then why it is happening, if we go into that, then we will find that in the Assamese Vaishnavite tradition, body is not actually considered as something which can be fruitful for human salvation. So if the translation is in the same way, as far as meaning is concerned in the target text, then maybe the whole audience will not be able to accept that poem. Therefore, that kind of strategy has been used, and we can refer to this as a cultural transposition. So all this makes complete equivalence impossible, and a translation can only be a proximal reflection of the source text. While we are talking about cultural turn, then we should consider this particular theorist, Itmer Ibn Johar and Gideon Torrey. They were functionalists in the area of translation, and they negated the concept of equivalence, and they believed that what is going to be achieved in the target language should be more important than merely adhering to the surface level of surface level meaning of the source text. Then we have polysystem theory by Ibn Johar. So he believed that literature should not be studied in isolation, because literature is always impacted by social, cultural, and historical framework, and all those things actually refer to or directs or points towards culture, and therefore one should be very careful while translating a text. Then we have Hans Vermeer, who is a German theorist. In his Scopus theory, he emphasized that this is purpose which is actually governing the translation. So what purpose we are translating is more important than merely linguistic transfer. Then in the 1980s, we have Susan Basnet and Andre Lefebvre. They believe that a translator, while transposing a text, should always carefully consider the ideological implication. while one is translating, one has to see how the ideological backdrop of the particular target text is going to accept the translation. Then finally, in the last slide, I am putting some of the post-colonial theorists. Here we have Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak. She actually introduced a feminist intervention into the theory of translation studies. And she believed that translation has a lot of influence on different groups, cultures, and peoples. And her coinage translatis refers to a lifeless form of target language that homogenizes the different source text authors. So the last line refers to the action or the activity that all the heterogeneous text from the Indian subcontinent has been translated into English without making any distinction among themselves. And this homogenization is actually harming the diversity of India. And then we have Tejaswini Niranjana. She believed that translation has been a site for perpetuating unequal relation among peoples, races, and languages. She sees colonial power to have constructed an unequal other, which is unchanging and outside history. And she therefore urges for using translation as a means of resistance to such power. So both the theories are actually involved in how we can use translation for the reinvigorating our past and how we can establish our own things in a right way. So in this very paper, I tried to show how translation is actually not only a linguistic activity, but at the same time, it is a cultural activity to a great extent. That's all, ma'am. Here I am.
Thank you so much, Janvinath. Extremely beautifully presented. Covered all aspects that
Thank you,
one
ma'am.
could. Explained how translation is an extremely complicated task and not easy. So, I mean, full marks to a translator if he does a great job, because he needs to actually step into the shoes of the author, the creator, and then do justice. So, really appreciate your effort in sharing with us what you feel and what it is all about. So, any questions from the audience?
Thank you, ma'am.
You may please ask questions if you have any.
Yes, please.
Culture, obviously, as you mentioned, plays a very, very important role in translation. And yes, translating poetry is all the more difficult. The examples that you chose were brilliantly, I mean, of course, corresponding to what you were sharing were really nice. I'm sure the listeners have learned a lot, gained several insights into translation. So what got you interested in this particular topic? Are you working?
Okay, ma'am. Actually, what happens during MPhil, it was a kind of sudden decision that I felt, interest into translation, because I, like to study both English and Assamese literature.
Okay.
So many times we immediately we get some kind of revelation how they are different and all those things. And that's how it came into my interest area. And it is always, it is so interesting that we get to know new things in day-to-day life, because every time we have to translate, even as I quoted Octavio Paz, since translation is a very universal act, every day we have to translate, we have to rephrase, and we have to say that same thing in different ways. So that is the basic idea how I got interest. And now actually I'm doing PhD on this very area. And during my MPhil, I had the poetry as my interest area, specification. But then now I'm moving to explore novel in the same area. So that's how I'm with this presentation today, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful, wonderful. So what do you think of transliteration?
Transliteration is a term that refers to word-for-word translation. Mm-hmm. So if one has to translate, for example, sometimes if we have to make some technical translation, then we have to just say we have to just rephrase it in another language. So in the vocabulary of translation studies, transliteration refers to word-for-word translation, as opposite to sense-for-sense translation, where one has to see how the in sense-for-sense translation, you can rephrase it in any way, but the thing should be retained there. But word for word is little more, straightforward and strictly related to linguistic.
So do you think it adds value, or transliteration adds value to
Of course, ma'am. Of course, ma'am. We cannot actually keep aside transliteration and then we can, go to the sense for sense translation or transcreation rather, because first of all, there are many basic things which are universal. There you can just do with only transliteration. So yes,
Right.
both are equally important, ma'am. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Janavinath. Hope you come up with an excellent PhD and we get to read it sometime.
Yeah, thank you for your kind words and appreciation, ma'am. It inspires me a lot. Thank you.
All right, so we come to the end of this session since we had only 4 speakers who were supposed to present this session. So I would like to ask the administration, so can we bring this session to a close? Really enjoyed listening to all 4 speakers. All the best to all of you. I'm sure everybody enjoyed, all the listeners enjoyed listening to all 4 of you. So can we bring this session to a close? The admin team. Is there anyone here from the admin? So I think since we don't have any other speakers, we'll bring it to a close. Request the admin to take over. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Ms. Kavita, we are through with all 4 sessions. I was just requesting someone from the admin to take over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, the technical session 4 follows. I invite Dr. Monica Daulat from College, University of Delhi, India, for the 3rd person. We welcome you, ma'am. I hand over the session to Dr. Monica.
Thank you, Ms. Kavita. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, you are audible.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm very delighted to be here to chair this session. As we can see, this is technical session 4, and we have 4 presenters with us. May I confirm if all the 4 presenters are there? Dr. Parul Yadav, Dr. Deepak Kumar Kapoor.
Yes, ma'am.
Vivek Kumar and S.
Yes, ma'am.
And S. Jerome. May I know your name, please? So, do we have Dr. Parul Yadav with us?
Hello. Boo.
All right. So we don't have Dr. Parul Yadav with us. Hello. Yes. So we'll start our technical session 4. Each presenter will have 10 minutes to present. And we can start our presentation. So Dr. Parul Yadav is not present with us. So I would like to invite Dr. Deepak Kapoor.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Hello.
Good afternoon. Yes.
क्या अभी पिछले 4 महीने पहले ही तो प्रपोजल सबमिट हुआ, 3 महीने रादर.
Shruti Mita, ma'am. Hello, Shruti Mita ma'am. Can you please mute yourself? Miss Kavita?
नहीं बता देंगे कि इस बार नैक की वो विजिट थी तो मतलब बच्चे भी उसमें खुद
I
भी ऐसे
request
ही
Shruti
बोलना
Mita ma'am to please mute.
हाँ 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 हाँ
All right, we can start. So, I would like to welcome Dr. Deepak Kumar, the
Yeah.
Associate Professor from GKSM Government College, Punjab, India. He's going to present on the topic Freudian psychoanalysis, some insights. So, yes, Mr. Deepak Kumar, you can start.
ठीक है
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I really feel honored to be part of this presentation. So I will try to share my PPT from my phone only because my
हाँ बस वही दे दे थोड़ा सा इंटरेस्ट क्रिएट कर देंगे तो अच्छा रहेगा
Yes, you can just give me 1 second. Shruti Mita ma'am. Is there anyone here from admin? Okay, Dr. Deepak Kumar Kapoor, you can start.
Okay, ma'am. I am trying to share
Yes,
my
your
screen.
screen is visible. Your screen is visible.
Now, is the PPT visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. So
You can
my
proceed.
topic for today's talk is Freudian psychoanalysis, some insights. So first of all, I would like to mention that Freud said something different. Is somebody speaking? Pardon?
Yes, actually, there is someone. Just as yes, you can continue.
Okay.
तो नंबर पूछ ले ask him the number हाँ ask him the number if it is a good number then yeah we can do that
So the primary thing that I want to mention here is that
8-10 के लिए डीन क्यों आएंगे
sorry ma'am, there is some disturbance.
Yes, there is. Shruti
अब
Mita
जैसा कोई
ma'am.
बोल देंगे रिक्वेस्ट कर देंगे कि तरफ आ जाए
Shruti Mita ma'am, can you please
पिक्चर्स ले लेंगे फोटो हाँ एग्जैक्टली अपने बच्चों के साथ आहूजा सर के साथ पहले देख लेते हैं ना कितनी ला रहे हैं नहीं तो अगर अच्छा नंबर है अगर बहुत अच्छा नंबर है तो हम मैम को भी कह सकते हैं लेट अस सी ना कितना नंबर है पर आखिरी मिनट पे नहीं बोल सकते ना मैम से
anyone from admin here?
तो आप मतलब बता दो सर कितना नंबर है फिर अकॉर्डिंगली इफ रिक्वायर्ड हम बीसी मैम को भी बुला लेंगे नहीं तो डीन को बुला ही लेंगे डीन ही बोलियो हाँ
Is there anyone from admin here, Miss Kavita?
बोल देंगे
Just give me 1 minute. I'll just call the admin.
Okay.
Oh, sure, ma'am.
Yeah.
हाँ ठीक है मैं तो यहीं बैठी हूँ तू ही ड्राइव कर रही है घर पहुंच के कर ले नंबर पूछ ले हाँ 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 नहीं 10 तो कोई अच्छा नंबर नहीं है यार 10 के लिए वाइस चांसलर क्यों आएगी फोटो खिंचा के जीबी भी तो देखेगी कि वीसी 10 किताबें कोई डोनेट कर रहा है ये तो ऐसे ही कर देते हैं
वेट फॉर 1 मिनट
और डैड ने मेरे कम से कम 400-500 किताबें डोनेट करी हैं ये लाजपत राय भवन लाइब्रेरी में कोई फोटो वोटो नहीं खिंचवाई कितनी कर देते हैं लोग जो एकेडमिक फील्ड में होते हैं जब अगर आपने 40 साल उसमें कर दी है ना खूब किताबें होती है पहले यहाँ जो हमारे फर्स्ट डायरेक्टर थे भट्टाचार्य उन्होंने भी 300-400 किताबें डोनेट की थी कोई फोटो वोटो कुछ नहीं होती है पर ये 10 में मांग रहे हैं पता नहीं क्या चाह रहे हैं तू फिर भी नंबर पूछ ले 3 सर को बुला ले हाँ 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 एक पिक्चर ले जाते आपके साथ ठीक है चल ठीक है ओके बाय
Shruti Mita ma'am.
हेलो
Yes, you are not on mute. We are not able to start our session. Can you please mute yourself? Thank you. Sorry for the inconvenience. So I would like to invite Dr. Deepak Kapoor. Could you please start? We can see your screen.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks a lot.
10 minutes for the presentation and we will take the questions at the end. So, so whoever has the question, they can type their questions in the chat box. All right?
Yes. So my topic for today is Freudian psychoanalysis, some insights. So first of all, I would like to mention the fact that Freud said something different. Because prior to Freud, the mental illnesses like you can say hysteria, neurosis, psychosis, it was thought that there was some physical basis for them. Means there was something wrong with the neurons or with the brain material or with the gray material, whatever. Means there was something physical behind this. But Freud, when he analyzed his patients, he came to the conclusion that it is not the brain that is damaged, but the mind. It means he focused on the psychic energy. He proposed that mind has an entity of its own that is different from the brain. It is true that mind is a product of the brain only, but once mind is formed, then it has its own personality, its own life, its own world, and the psychic energy operates there. And these ailments like psychosis, neurosis, hysteria, melancholia, etc., these were not the result of some physical problem with the brain, but with the repressed thoughts, the thoughts that were repressed during childhood or during some trauma. Those thoughts led to such mental illness. So this was the you can say the contribution of Freud, that he uh, proposed or rather proved through experiments that these mental ailments are not a result of something wrong physically with the brain, but it's a result of the repressed thoughts of our psyche that lead to such ailments. So, these days, however, there have been some improvements or some new advances where they do find some physical causes for hysteria, but at that time, at Freud's time, his theory was widely accepted. So his theory was known as psychoanalysis. So it is the study of the repressed thoughts of the human psyche. So he only dealt with those things that are repressed. Now, repressed means which are unconsciously repressed. When we suppress something, that is conscious effort, but when it is repressed, that is unconsciously. So this psychoanalysis deals with the study and investigation of the repressed thoughts of the human psyche, and it's a science, and it deals with the general as well as the particular. And there are many approaches in this psychoanalysis, uh, and there are about a dozen approaches, and Freudian psychoanalysis is one aspect of it, which deals with the repressed thoughts of our mind. And repressed means those thoughts are hidden unconsciously. We don't know that those thoughts are hidden, and yet those hidden thoughts influence our behavior even in the adult life. Now, this psychoanalysis emerged as a promising field in the beginning of 20th century. There were other thinkers also, like Carl Jung, Alfred Adler, and they gave their own versions. But Freudian psychoanalysis, it was considered the main thing for many, many years. And then we can talk about this Carl Jung, who proposed analytical psychology. He gave the concept of total unconscious, means our social unconscious, and he said unconscious is part of the social unconscious. Freud focused only on the personal unconscious, whereas Carl Jung focused on the social or our total unconscious. And now recently, if you see in the recent times, the focus has shifted to the object relations approach. Means they don't consider very much about the repressed thoughts, but about the relation that is there between the patient and the psychoanalyst, so that the psychopathology of the patient's childhood can be brought to the fore. Means there is focus on the repressed thoughts, but not that much as was in Freud's time. And these days, the problems of attachment and intimacy, means the problems that occur in our family relationship, those are in focus, and not other problems like hysteria or neurosis or psychosis. So this change has occurred over the decades. Now here I also talk about this psychoanalytical criticism. Since being a student of literature, when we deal with psychoanalytical criticism, it considers that all the literary texts, these are like dreams, and these express the unconscious or hidden or repressed desires and anxieties of the author. So you can say any work of art is taken to be a manifestation of the author's neuroses only. So psychoanalytical critics, they focus on what is behind the author's mind that he led to a particular work or a particular character or a particular line of thinking. And similarly, the characters that are developed in any work, in any novel, or in any play, the unconscious desires, anxieties, and repressed feelings of the characters, these are studied under psychoanalytical criticism. And here we can also talk about, when we talk about psychoanalysis, we cannot skip id, ego, and superego. As you may all be knowing, that these are, you can say, three functional parts of our mind, not brain. These are not to be found in the brain anywhere, but these are the parts of the mind. It is the pleasure-seeking part of our mind, means that part only wants pleasure at any cost. And ego is that part of our mind that deals with the reality. It controls our pleasure-seeking principle and makes us behave in some realistic and acceptable way. And then there is the superego. Superego means our ideals and our values. And this is society specific. For example, I have been born in India, so I have certain values, certain ideals. Suppose I had been born in Africa, in some tribe of Africa, or in Iran, Iraq, or in America, then my superego would have been different. Then my ideals, my values, what is right, what is wrong, it would have varied. So this is not something constant, but it depends upon where you are born. Means our birth decides what kind of morality we develop. So superego is the morality that we develop. Now I will talk a little bit about the application of Freudian theory in daily life. For example, there was a case when a grown-up man, a sensible person, had an irrational fear of mice. Whenever he saw a mouse, he started trembling, and he himself didn't know how, why is it that when I see a mouse I started trembling. So his psychoanalysis was done, and it was found when he was taken into that trance state, and all his repressed memories, they were brought to the fore. It was found that when he was a child, he was bitten by a rat, and at that time he bled profusely. He bled a lot, and he had to be given many injections for many days. And that memory, it was repressed by his childhood mind. Means during childhood, that memory got repressed. That memory got hidden unconsciously, and that childhood fear brought this strange change in his behavior in the adult life. That he, on seeing a mouse, he started trembling with fear. Similarly, there is another case. There was a sensible lady, but she was not able to be in a long-lasting relationship with any man, because she used to check the emails or the phone calls of any person she dated, and she did this compulsively, not thoughtfully, but in spite of herself. And after psychoanalysis, it was found that uh, when she was a child, her parents, they had a very stressful marriage. Her father used to beat her mother, and then he left the family. So unconsciously, she developed an irrational fear that she will also be betrayed by a man. So she used to check the emails and the phone calls of every person whom she dated with, and that person did not like it, and the relationship broke apart. So these two examples tell us that our repressed memories, our repressed thoughts, desires, these influence our adult life also, and even after many years. For example, in our dreams, these repressed thoughts, they can come to our conscious minds in our dreams, or in the slips of pen, or in the slips of tongue, or in such behavior that we ourselves are not able to explain that why we are doing such kind of behavior. So now Freudian psychoanalysis gives us a peep into the hidden aspects of the human personality. So we can say that, in a nutshell, we can say that all of us have a hidden personality, and we are not aware of that. We think that we are very sensible and rational people, but otherwise, our repressed thoughts, they keep on controlling us, each and every one of us, every second of our lives. So we are at the mercy of our, you can say, unconscious mind, unconscious repressed thoughts and desires. This hidden personality is determined by the unconscious processes, and all this happens unconsciously. We don't do this consciously, and we are primarily. Freud also said that we are primarily driven by our sexual and aggressive instincts. That is the psychic energy. That is uh, the basic part of us. That is there when a child is born. And these instincts are those which find expression in art and science. And according to Freud, when this energy is used for creative purposes, it is no longer available for sexual purposes. And this creates misery and guilt. So the relationship between the person and society is controlled by the primitive urges, primitive desires present in our unconscious mind, and all this forms the basis of our hidden personality. So this was a little bit about what Freud wanted to say, that how our mind is different from the brain. Brain is something physical, but mind is totally psychical. It develops from the brain, but once mind is developed, it forms its own life, its own world, and these mental ailments, like hysteria, psychosis, neurosis, melancholia, etc. These are not a product of some ailment in the brain, some ailment with the neurons or the synapses, but these are the result of the trauma, the unconscious desires. Hello?
Dr. Deepak, you have 1 minute left.
Okay, okay, fine. I'm concluding only. So I was saying that Freud's contribution is that he gave importance to the psychic energy that operates in us. It is different from the physical energy. No doubt it derives from the physical energy, but once it is there, once our mind is formed during childhood, then it has its own life, its own entity, and these mental ailments, they are more a product of the mind than of the brain. No doubt, if somebody's brain is damaged or due to some injury, there is some problem with the brain, then also mental ailments occur. But normally, mental ailments like psychosis, neurosis, hysteria, these are not a result of something wrong being with the physicality of the brain, but with the repressed thoughts and desires, with the trauma that a person faced during childhood. So this was what I wanted to say in a
Thank
short
you
span.
so much, Dr. Deepak. It was such a wonderful presentation. As
Thank
I
you.
can see the chat box that the in-call messages are not allowed. So is there any question from our audience for Mr. Deepak, from Dr. Deepak? Okay, no questions. So we can proceed ahead. Thank you. I would like to congratulate Deepak, Mr. Deepak Kumar.
Thank you. Thanks.
Is Dr. Parul Yadav with us?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Okay. Dr. Parul Yadav is an associate professor in MET School of Liberal Arts, MET University, Haryana. Parul Yadav, Dr. Parul Yadav, would you like to present your screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Sure.